that are about to take place, and to stand before the Son of Man. During the day, he was teaching in the temple, but that evening he would go down and spend the night in the mount, which is called Olivet. And all the people would get up early in the morning and come to him in the temple to listen to him.
Taking place? Where is Jesus at this point in Luke's narrative? Jerusalem, city of David. That's where he is. He's made his triumphal entry on the colt of a donkey. The people have cried out, what word? Hosanna. Save us. Lord, save us. That's what Hosanna means. And they were laying palm fronds in their garments in the road, so his little donkey wouldn't even have to get its hooves dirty. That's how much honor they were showing him. So he comes into town, cleanses the temple, and he's teaching, and he's across from the temple treasury here in chapter 21, verse 1. And who does he see putting their gifts into the treasury? The poor widow, but who else first? The rich. Now think about this. When we make our contributions on Sunday morning, we can write out a check or fold up some money, and nobody knows what we contribute. It's a very private thing, and that's good. There's nothing wrong with that. But this was pretty public. It was right there. They were throwing their money into the box, and people could see because they didn't have checks, I don't believe. And he sees this poor widow's contribution. What does he say about it? She has given more. How could she be giving more? More in whose eyes? More in the Lord's eyes. We measure money and we know that the coins she put in weren't worth that much. As a matter of fact, I've read this and I've wondered to myself, maybe you have too, why did she even bother to put those coins in the treasury? What's that? Probably so. That would be my thought process. However, we got to agree that that's speculation. We don't know. We don't know what her motivation was. We can think that, but that's not what's addressed. She must have loved the Lord because of what Jesus said about it, because what she tossed into that box, he said, was more.
Faith to realize that God would take care of her. So she gave it.
What's the lesson for us?
It is that we today need to have more faith in God and spend less time on frivolous things, less money on frivolous things, and think about what it can do for our Lord.
Sounds like a pretty good plan to me. How can we put that plan in action? I mean, we can talk about it, but what can we really do? What can we do to show our faith?
She gave all she had.
Okay.
And so when I think about that, I think we as Christians should give all we have, not necessarily money, but even the smallest amount of time we have. Then giving that little bit of extra personal time to God is showing him how much we care about him. No matter, because some people have a lot of personal time, some people have a little, some people have a lot of money, some people have a little, but the less you have, if only people who have a lot, it's not, it doesn't take a lot out of them to give 10, 15 minutes, but someone who's only got like that 10, 15 minutes is all the personal time they'll have that day, and they give it to God, it means more to God. It's just a correlation I see here.
All right. Has anybody ever done something for you that from the vantage point of most people it would have seemed like a small thing, but to you it was huge? Anybody ever give you a phone call at a point when you needed a phone call? And phone calls are so easy. You got one of these things now. It used to be you had to be in your house or in a place of business where you see a phone booth, and if Superman wasn't in there, you could go in there and put some coins in and make a call, and then the operator would come on, please insert 25 more cents, whatever it was. If you're making a long distance call, write a note. So many things are easy to do, and they're small, but they can mean a lot to people.
Sacrificial giving.
Yes.
Do we really sacrifice to give today? That's the whole point. Do you give up a vacation and give that money to the Lord? Do you give up a new car, that money that would buy you a new car and a new vehicle, and do you give it to the Lord?
Right.
I think sometimes we don't sacrifice. That's with our time, with our money and everything, you know? We don't sacrifice.
When we were doing Freedom to Serve, that's what we called it, when we were trying to retire our building debt. By the way, if I remember the figures, in December of next year, we'll have this building paid off. Harold, does that sound right to you? Really?
That, I think.
Fantastic.
There's families that are helping try to get that paid off sooner.
So we can really tie one on at Christmas. You should see the look on his face. The reason, well, why are we looking forward to doing that? More money to do other things with. Now, at this point, and we are, Jesus is talking about her putting in her 2 mites. We're talking about money. Leslie brought up the idea that time is valuable. As a matter of fact, I've gotten to the point in my life where I would just about rather pay somebody to do a lot of things that I used to do by myself. Yeah, because my time is more valuable and my body doesn't work as well as it used to do some of those things. However, I still enjoy changing a few things on the car, whatever. The point is, we have things of value. And when Paul wrote to the church at Philippi, he said, whatever you do in word or deed, do it how? Do all in the name of the Lord. What does that mean? To me, that means if I've got a secular job, and I've had plenty of secular work, I can go to that work, and if my mindset is, what can I do for the Lord today while I'm at work? And I'm not talking necessarily about having a Bible study about somebody, but just being cheerful. Is there anybody on the planet who ought to be more cheerful than us? Regardless of the pain and difficulty we're going through here, we know we're not staying here. We know we've got something to look forward to afterwards that's eternal and greater than anything we could imagine having here. So why not go to work happy? I see all these things on Facebook about how horrible Mondays are. Why? If you've got a job to go to on Monday, that's something to be grateful for. If you wake up alive on Monday and you don't wake up dead, and you can get out of bed and get in your car and go to work, and you got food to eat and a house to come back to and a family, hey, there's so many things to be thankful for. I've tried to live my life with gratitude, and I think I've made a decent stab at it, but that all changed a couple years ago when I went to Haiti. And I saw how much I have to be grateful for. Go to Haiti. Go to some third world country. Go to some place where they don't even, and you don't even have to do that. Get in your car and drive around Oklahoma City until you find the worst neighborhood you can find. We used to do this with our kids. Put them in the car and take them to bad neighborhoods. Not to look down our nose at other people, but to say, would you like to live here? Well, no, I'm scared driving through it. I don't want to live here. Then, are you grateful for what you've got? Drive them past some of the schools and ask them if they're glad to go to Choctaw. I mean, there's so many things you can do that just focus on what we've got instead of what we don't have. And I think that's what this lady was doing. She was focusing on the fact that she has God and she can depend on God and she doesn't have to rely on that money, because she could have held on to that and said, this is the last 2 coins I've got. I'm going to hold on to this. The Lord will understand. And perhaps he would have. But the point is, she didn't. She gave him. And Jesus said she put in how much? She put in more. And you and I can put in more. We can put in more every day. We can put in more. we can change our thinking so that almost every hour of the day we are doing something in our minds for the Lord. Can you work for the Lord while you're on Facebook? Duh. If you get on Facebook, can you work for the Lord while you're in the grocery store? Has anybody ever spoken to you in the grocery store and it just kind of, oh, hey, somebody's talking to me? I don't know how many people there are in the world who just feel lonely, but I know there's a bunch. And if we're someplace in a public venue and it's appropriate, don't be inappropriate, but if it's appropriate, you can just speak to somebody. You're getting some apples and you're looking for wormholes and they come up to get apples and say, boy, I love apples, don't you? It doesn't have to be profound. If I'm doing it, believe me, it doesn't have to be profound. But this is a mindset that we can take on, and we can get up in the day and go live throughout the day, and we can put in more. We can put in more, and God will look down on us and say, look at that, putting in more. Yes. Elisha. Yeah, and what did he say? Well, first fix a little cake of bread for me. And that was, to me, that's the faith issue. Okay, this is going to be your last meal. Well, first make one for me. And what happened?
First, and a woman and child ate last. So he had the right to eat first. But it was the same thing. She was honored in the Old Testament for this lady. She was honored in the New by being remembered as the last draw.
Right. And to finish the story, the container from which she got her meal, her flour, never got empty. The jar from which she poured out her oil never went empty until the famine was over. In other words, God's going to take care of us. His teaching to the Israelites was, you give me the first fruits. You give me the first fruits, and I'll always make sure that your wine vats are full, your oil vats are full, your barns are full. That was his promise to them. It's not the same thing as the gospel of prosperity that people preach today, but the idea is that God is going to take care of us. He's going to find a way.
She was of another nationality.
Right.
She wasn't Jew.
Now this lady was here, but the one you're talking about in Elisha's day. And that's a point that Jesus makes. You know, there were a lot of widows in the days of Elijah, but he was only sent to one, and she wasn't even Jewish. All right, verse 5. Any more discussion on this or comments, questions? Yes, Don.
We shouldn't think, I mean, if we happen to be giving a lot, that we shouldn't think that we are giving a lot. I mean, seems obvious, but the reason I'm bringing it up is obviously I don't think anybody's going to walk out of here and go, I think I'm going to get everything I got, and I'm going to sell it all. I'm going to give it to the church. I'm going to give it to the poor. I'm going to see if God takes care of it. I don't think any of us are really going to do that. So somewhere we got to be thinking it's prudent to save a little back for a rainy day. I mean, the only thing I can't find that in the New Testament. I can find it in Ecclesiastes.
Right.
And I don't think any of us is going to say, wow, I'm going to go buy the, and yet we can. I mean, we can, like you said, but where is it that you said, do everything in the name of God, in the name of the Lord, and do everything for, and I can't say that I do that. I mean, obviously, I'm like, I want to go do this. And it's not because I'm doing it for the Lord. It's like, I think this is going to be fun and I want to go do this.
Right.
And so I struggle with some of that sometimes when I read the verses, do all in the name of the Lord. And I'm like, I know I'm not doing this all in the name. I mean, I'm open and honest with God to say, I'm just going to have fun. And maybe in a sense that is doing things for the Lord. Because like you said, when you're there, you want to act presentable, in a godly manner. So, sometimes I struggle with my own.
And we know we're not
back and forth. Right.
Yeah.
But because this isn't the only place that says someone gave all. I mean,
right.
He said to the rich man, give everything you got. He went away sad. We're like, wow. But then we'll turn around and say, well, we don't really have to do that.
Right.
And so, nobody knows how much God is. I don't know how much he's putting on you to give. I don't know. Sometimes I don't even know how much he's putting on me to give. I just kind of set my standard and say, God, here it is. If you want to give more, you're going to have to give me more love some way, somehow, because I'm holding some of it back a bit. I just try to be open with him and say, I don't know if I'm doing enough or not, And obviously, if you think you are, you might be trying to work your way to heaven. If you pick up this 10% plus a little, so you make sure you're not giving less, So, anyway, I just want to throw that out there, my thoughts and my struggles with doing everything for God. And, I just try to do better, I suppose.
I think to do things with a mindset towards God, it doesn't mean that everything has to be churchy, quote unquote. If I'm going to go hunting, I can still think about God while I'm out there, and I can say, I need this time to get out and get away, and that everything has to be balanced, and everything's a judgment call. How much time should I spend watching TV? Should I watch TV at all? If I read books instead of watching TV, what books can I read, and how long can I read until I've read too much and spent too much time serving myself? How much food should I eat? We can drive ourselves nuts trying to figure out how many bites of breakfast to have. But if we're just thinking, I'm a child of God, my Father is the creator of heaven and earth. I've got a reason to be happy, and I've got a reason to help others to be happy and to share with them the good that I've got. And if God says to me, you need to sell everything you've got and give it to the poor, then that's what I need to do. But Jesus didn't tell everybody to do that. And he looked at these guys who were rich, and they were putting their gifts into the treasury, and he didn't demean or denigrate that. No, he just said, look at that, she's putting in everything, and because of what she's putting in, she has put in more. He didn't say, these guys, they're losers. He said, they're just by comparison, she's putting in more. Don?
The treasury was to go to the Levites.
Right.
To pay their bills. It wasn't that, here, I'm doing a great thing for my neighbor over there, because he wouldn't get any of the money that I give to the Levites. Well, see, that was the thing back then. It was kind of like a tax. You gave in a free will, or you gave 10%.
But the one thing that's constant, and has always been constant, whether it's Abel's offering or what we're putting in the plate today, we do it because of our faith in God. Regardless of what we think is going to happen with our contribution, it's a contribution in my mind that I make for God. I don't make it for the elders. I didn't do that when I wasn't an elder. I sure don't do it now that I am an elder. I do it because of God. That's what it's for. When Cain and Abel made their offerings, Abel made his of faith. It was for God. I don't know what God did with it. I don't know what happened to that offering, if it just all got burned up, but that's what we are supposed to do, and that's what this lady does. Now, X number of dollars goes to the church, let's say, out of our personal finances. Is that the only giving we can do? Have some imagination.
The actual thing that you should be doing, you go out there and knock on somebody's door and say, hey, you and your kids want to come to VBS or church or something?
That's a job.
Let's all go to lunch and talk about it. Now, that's what you should be doing. The money that goes to church takes care of the light bulbs and the preacher and the various things. They do their job, and what is left is what you're supposed to do.
And that is our faith. What we do is our faith. What we offer is our faith. Exactly.
So you got to work, you got to go knock on the door, you got to go talk to some yahoo.
Starting in verse 5. While some were talking about the temple, that it was adorned and beautiful with beautiful stones and votive gifts, he said, as for these things which you're looking at, the days will come in which there will not be left one stone upon another. What's he talking about? What's going to happen? What does Jesus know is going to happen? Romans, what year is this being said? About AD 33. When are the Romans going to come? AD 70. within about a generation. A generation's generally considered around 40 years. And Jesus will mention that in just a little bit. So they're outside the temple, they're watching people put their gifts in, and he's telling them, look at all this beautiful stuff. Every stone's going to be dismantled eventually. That's what's going to happen. They question him in verse 7. When will these things happen? What will be the sign when these things are about to take place? And then he tells them what? He's getting to that. What's he tell them first? Don't be misled. Now, if Jesus tells you not to be misled, why would he tell you that? Because there's a very good possibility that you might be misled. He goes on to say, many will come in my name saying, I'm he. The time is near. And he says, don't go after him. He continued saying, nation's going to rise against nation, kingdom's going to rise against kingdom. We hear this all the time today. People quote this with regard to the final coming of Christ. But is he talking about the final coming? He's not talking about the final coming. He's talking about Jerusalem. He says elsewhere, Matthew 24, he says of that day and hour, the final day, nobody knows, not even the angels in heaven. He said he didn't even know. And he said there's not going to be any signs for that day. It's going to come like a thief in the night. But this day, there are signs for this day, the destruction of Jerusalem. It says in verse 12, before all these things, look what's going to happen to the apostles and to the faithful, to the church. They're going to lay hands on you. They'll persecute you, delivering you to the synagogues and prisons. Just read the book of Acts. You see all of this in the book of Acts. Bringing you before kings and governors for my name's sake. Look at verse 13. What's it all going to lead to? Wouldn't you today like to have an opportunity to talk to somebody about the gospel? I hope you're saying, yeah, I'd love to do that. I hope you've prepared yourself and you're ready and you're excited. And even if you don't feel like you're terribly prepared, I'd at least like to do it. And we ought to, because you know this to be true as well as I do. If you go to a nice restaurant anywhere in town that you've never been to before and you have the best meal you've ever had, what are you going to do? You're going to tell somebody. You're not going to go home and say, well, you know, I don't know exactly where they got that beef, so I'm not going to mention this to anybody, because they might ask me where that beef was raised, and I don't know. And I'm not sure if that dressing had corn oil or olive oil in it, so I'm not going to tell anybody how good it was. Now, that's the approach that a lot of us take with the gospel. And if somebody else told you, you need to shut up because you're stupid and you don't know enough Bible to tell people about Jesus. If somebody else told you that, what would you do? You smack them. At least in your mind you'd smack them, because nobody's going to tell me that. Maybe that's the line of preaching that we ought to start taking. Don't tell anybody about Jesus. You're too dumb. And that's what we tell ourselves. And we let ourselves get by with it. I can't tell anybody about Jesus. So he says, this is what's going to happen when all these bad things come about. It's going to be an opportunity for you to testify. Verse 13, an opportunity for your testimony.
What you do is keep your mouth shut and your hands working, and then you won't look like a fool. You know what a Christian does. You go over there and say, hey, look, let's go help this old boy. He's having a real hard time. And you go help the old boy. This old boy over here is going to see what you're doing. He said, you don't have to be smart. He said, you got to be willing and able, and here's my hand.
Right. It often works like that, but oftentimes what happens is you get an opportunity through that means, and then you say, well, I'm not going to do it because I don't know enough and I'm not smart enough. Whereas we ought to do both. We ought to be working in such a way that people see our light. That's what Jesus said. Let them see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven. And then they'll know you're bona fide, you're real, you're legitimate, you really are a Christian. Let me ask you about Jesus. And they say, well, you need to talk to my pastor because I'm not smart enough about Jesus to tell you. No! That's the Greek word for that is baloney. Just tell them what you know. You don't have to tell them what you don't know. You can't do that anyway. Tell them what you do know. Express your concern for their soul. That's what we need to be doing more of, so much more of, is talking to people about the Lord. He says in verse 14, I really appreciate this. He says, make up your minds not to prepare beforehand to defend yourselves. Why? I will give you utterance and wisdom that will show everybody how smart you are and turn them to me. Does it say that? Not exactly, does it? What does it say? It says, I'll give you utterance and wisdom which none of your opponents will be able to resist or refute. But you will still, I'm putting the word still in there, you will still be betrayed even by parents and brothers and relatives and friends, and they will put some of you to death. Even though God is putting the perfect words in your mouth to say, people are still going to put you to death, God is saying. When you and I come up with reasonable answers to people who are asking, if they are good ground, they will accept what we are saying. If they're not good ground, it doesn't matter what you say. They will not hear you. Just take a look at the political situation today. I would really like to know how many Republicans ever listen to anything a Democrat says. How many Democrats listen to anything a Republican says? Sometimes I think we all get in one room and somehow find a way to keep anybody from finding out what political party we're with. But you know what would happen in that situation? We start talking about issues and expressing our values, and pretty soon people will start pointing fingers. You're one of those. I can tell because of what you believe. And that's what Jesus is saying here. I'm going to give you what to say. And even though you're saying the perfect thing, people are still going to put you to death.
The easiest way to get them to agree with each other is to lock the door when they start running out of air. They start agreeing with each other.
And maybe that's what we need to do in Congress. Even by your parents. Remember John 9? Man born blind, Jesus gives his sight back, and they ask the parents, who made this? Who made your son gave his sight back? What'd they say? Yeah, he's of age. Why did they say that? They knew they'd be put out of the synagogue. I'm not trying to speak lightly of what these parents were up against. That was a scary thing. I'm not justifying it either. But I'm saying this is real. You'll be hated by all because of my name. What did some people immediately begin to express as soon as this guy killed 49 people in Orlando? It's those right-wing Christians. If they hadn't been spouting so much hatred about the homosexuals, this guy wouldn't have killed them. Did you ever get wind that that's one of the things being said out there? What's that? Or get rid of all the guns.
It was the man that killed.
Well, try getting everybody to believe that. These guys are going to have everything right. They're going to say everything right and do everything right, and they're still going to be rejected and killed. Does that sound familiar? What are we coming to in chapter 24? Jesus said, if you follow me, people are going to treat you the way they treat me. He was perfect in every aspect. I'm not.
It was like an organization. One new organization pushing against the other, you'll always get pushback. And that's the people in charge at that time was pushing back.
Jesus had told the apostles, don't be fighting for power, because that's the way it is in the world. Now, he said that's the way it is with the Gentiles, but it's that way with the Jews as well. I think he must have told them that's the way it is with the Gentiles to make an impression on them. Verse 20, when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, do you remember how Matthew described that? When you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet. Daniel had prophesied about this particular event that was coming up, this destruction of Jerusalem. So Matthew brings that up and he talks about it. But Matthew doesn't describe it in detail like Luke does. Luke says, when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, that's the abomination of desolation. This place is going to be desolate when they're done. The temple's going to be desecrated, torn down stone by stone. That is the abomination of desolation. And Jesus says, then those who are in Judea must do what? Flee to the mountains. See, this is how we know he's not talking about the end of time or the final coming. Not going to flee from that. Let me read you something. I don't know if you've ever heard of Eusebius. Eusebius was a member of the Lord's church. He lived from about 260 to 340, and he is known as the father of church history. He wrote about this, and here's what he said. See if I can get this read before the last bell. After Nero had held the government about 13 years, Galba and Otho reigned about a year and 6 months. Vespasian, who had become illustrious in the campaign against the Jews, was then proclaimed sovereign in Judea, receiving the title of emperor from the armies there. Directing his course, therefore, immediately to Rome, he commits the care of the war against the Jews into the hands of his son Titus. For after the ascension of our Savior, the Jews, in addition to their wickedness against him, were now incessantly plotting mischief against his apostles. First they slew Stephen by stoning him, next James, the son of Zebedee, and the brother of John, by beheading, and finally James, who first obtained the episcopal seat at Jerusalem after the ascension of our Savior, and was slain in the manner before related. But the rest of the apostles, who were harassed in innumerable ways with a view to destroy them and driven from the land of Judea, had gone forth to preach the gospel to the nations, relying upon the aid of Christ, when he said, "Go ye, teach all nations in my name." Now, then he says, the whole body, however, of the church at Jerusalem, having been commanded by a divine revelation given to men of approved piety there before the war, removed from the city and dwelt at a certain town beyond the Jordan called Pella. What's he saying? This is English, but it's not the same kind of English we use. He's saying the Christians left Jerusalem. They got a message. You don't need to be here anymore because the time's for you to flee, and they fled. They went to a place called Pella. Now, there's some controversy as to whether or not this actually happened or if Eusebius made it up or whatever. But if Jesus in the Gospels says, here's the signs to look for that you need to get out of town, when Jerusalem's encompassed by armies. Now, and what happened, Vespasian came and he encircled the city. Nero went down, and in a year and a half time, Galba and Otho rose to power and went down. And then the troops said, let's make Vespasian the emperor. So they contacted Vespasian, got him on the cell phone, I guess, and said, you're the new emperor. Vespasian says, oh, I got to get back to Dodge. So he pulls away from Jerusalem long enough for the Christians to say, pack up your stuff, we're getting out of here. We've seen the abomination of desolation. They get out of town, according to Eusebius. Titus comes back, encircles the city, and it goes down. And it goes down hard. I don't remember if it was in a sermon or a Bible class. If you want to read the horrors of Jerusalem's fall, read Flavius Josephus, and you will learn that Jerusalem did not fall primarily from Roman incursion. Jerusalem fell because when the Romans surrounded the city, it started with 4 factions. It quickly went to 3 factions, and those 3 factions basically wiped each other, tortured each other, starved each other, and killed each other before the Romans even got inside. It's horrific. Corey.
Before we go, can we look at verse 27?
27. They will see the Son of Man coming in the cloud with power and great glory. Yes. In Isaiah chapter 19, if you want to go there real quick, I don't think this is to be taken literally. And the reason is that we see this kind of imagery in the Old Testament, and we know it's already happened. Nevertheless, Isaiah 19, verse 1, the oracle concerning Egypt. Behold, the Lord is riding on a swift cloud and is about to come to Egypt. That would have been a sight. I don't think it's to be taken literally. It's poetic language for this is the way God's coming. Jesus is coming. And we get this imagery of literally seeing him in the clouds, and I don't know that that's what Jesus is saying, but he is coming. He's coming in judgment. If you read through the Old Testament, he came several times over and over and over and over again. The Old Testament prophets said that God came, but nobody ever saw God like this. This to me is an expression of it's for certain. Don?
Also, in every instance of the Old Testament, when this imagery was used, it was always the changing of a king or the changing of power over one country over another one.
Right.
And in this case, it kind of depicts that this is the fall of the Jewish system. It can't be propagated anymore. They've lost all the I want to say data. You couldn't have the Jews couldn't follow their system anymore. They didn't know what tribe was to be a priest. They couldn't follow their genealogies. That system couldn't work anymore. I mean, that was the final blow to that system, truly. I mean, they can't follow the Old Testament if they wanted to.
Right. I hope that helps answer that.
It did, yes.
Good.
I was just wanting to make sure that was in continuation with the earlier verses. So we're still talking about the destruction of Jerusalem there.
I believe so. I think he's still talking about the destruction of Jerusalem. He gets down a little farther on the text and he says,
So in other words, the new covenant, it's free to go now. The old covenant is for sure gone, and now the new covenant is coming in.
Verse 32, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place. Now, there are some who come back and say, well, he's talking about the generation that's alive when the end comes.
He switches right in the middle of,
Right.
Fording the river there.
Right.
I mean, then you don't go out there in one boat and try to switch to another.
No. You don't change horses in the middle?
No.
He's talking about the destruction of Jerusalem, and I believe that's what he's limiting his remarks to here. Other questions? Maybe they'll ring a third bell or a fourth bell. All right, thank you very much. I appreciate it.